Did you hear about the Dismantle the DEI Act, which Republicans are trying to push through Congress in order to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government? Here's a clip from the hearings.
You tell me which white men were dragged out of their homes. You tell me which one of them got dragged all the way across an ocean and told that you are going to go and work. We are going to steal your wives. We are going to rape your wives. That didn't happen. That is oppression. We didn't ask to be here. We're not the same migrants that y'all constantly come up against. We didn't run away from home. We were stolen.
That was Representative Jasmine Crockett, who is a star, and she laid it out the way it needs to be laid out. And yet, some folks in Congress are just trying to rewrite history.
Diversity, equity, inclusion are three words that don't necessarily mean what we think they mean. And in spite of the altruistic motives of some of the purveyors of it, diversity, equity, inclusion, as it's been initiated in our federal government as an ideology, seeks to categorize individuals based on their immutable characteristics. It is a rejection of the principles that people should be judged on the content of their character and their individual achievement rather than their sex, race, national origin, or ethnicity. DEI is a huge step backwards for our country.
Oh, yes, nothing screams fairness more than ignoring centuries of systemic racism and acting like it never happened. But let's see what else is going on at the hearing.
If we're being honest here, this bill, which will wipe out every diversity, equity, and inclusion program in our federal agencies, plus those who contract with us, plus those who receive grant money, plus our schools, is nothing new. This is just the final piece of a decades-long obsession with targeting and dismantling anything that might give marginalized people a fair shot, including DEI programs, which honestly started the second the Civil Rights Act passed. Policies like affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion are the closest things we've had to the mythical bootstraps that some of my colleagues insist historically and currently harmed communities need to pick themselves up back.
Of course, why fix inequality when you can just complain about the fix? And if you're wondering why they're so mad about equality, Representative Lee hits it on the head.
After centuries of efforts to keep us out of schools and universities, from jobs and elected office, Republicans targeting these policies are no accident. Why do predominantly conservative white men believe that the success of a black person or the opportunity or access of a black person is an existential threat to them? DEI is not given any unfair advantage that society itself does not already confer on certain Americans. It merely exists to ensure that all other people, that women, minoritized folks, queer folks, disabled folks, have the same opportunities to succeed and thrive in our workforce and our schools as people who have not had those opportunities systematically and legally stripped from them do. Is our country not greater when all of us have opportunities to succeed and contribute and survive?
Exactly. There's enough pie to go around. Calm down, Karen. Everyone can prosper. Let's just prosper together and let's help people in marginalized communities work their way up. The problem is not DEI. The problem is that the right is trying to pretend like DEI is an issue and that it's bringing people that are not qualified into the federal government. And that is not the case. First of all, it's not like when you implement a DEI program, you just go randomly and go, oh, you person who's not qualified to work at whatever government office, why don't you just come work over there? That's not what's happening. You have to be qualified. If anything, you could go the other way and look at all the people that Donald Trump is nominating for his cabinet. Talk about unqualified. And there hasn't been a person of color yet. I'm sure they're coming, but it hasn't come yet. And so we go back to this idea of DEI and why the right is so threatened by it. First of all, let's not forget, there's been systemic racism from a long time ago, like Congresswoman Crockett was saying. Black people did not come to this country voluntarily. They came and became slaves. Other people that are in marginalized communities did not ask to be part of the marginalized community. It's just that they're in the minority. Now, whether it's an LGBTQ person or whether it's somebody who's got a handicap issue or somebody who's person of color, whatever it is, these people for the longest time systemically were kept out. If you don't believe me, look up the Homestead Act. Homestead Act was something that was supposed to help people move west and build property. And they strategically kept it away from people of color, black people, Native Americans, and they gave it to white people. So they were basically giving handouts to white people to go build in the West, and they were like, oh, if you're black, we're not going to give it to you. Or like redlining, that's another one. You keep people out of a certain community by just keeping them away from where they might prosper. So let's not ignore the fact that we have marginalized communities, that there's been racism within our history, and that we need to help those marginalized communities get a leg up and do well. So let's put that on the side. And now let's look at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let's look at the fact that, once again, people that are being hired for certain positions are qualified. If you want to talk about unqualified, let's just look at this whole thing of DEI at universities, all right? They were saying that the Supreme Court decided that DEI is no longer going to be a thing at universities. And a lot of people were saying, well, you know, they're giving positions, or they're giving, students, they're allowing students into universities based on their background, and they are favoring those people because they want to fill a quota. Now, let's not forget that a lot of these universities have legacies. They have people who went to that school before. And if that person comes from a family of, let's say, a white family that continues to donate money and continues to prosper, then their kid and their kid and their kid is going to keep going to that university. Whether the kid's qualified or not, they're going to get in. So where does that fall into diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why is that not something that's tipping the scale in the favor of the rich who have already prospered? Similarly, with what they're trying to do now with the federal government, we got to look at these positions and go, well, who's in these positions? Let's go to the Trump White House again. He had Jared Kushner as an advisor, as well as Ivanka. They're not qualified to be advisors at the White House, and yet they were, because of nepotism, because this white dude was like, I want my white kid and her husband to be part of my administration. I mean, talk about unfairness. Talk about not pulling yourselves up by the bootstraps, right? And so that's what they say a lot of times. Anytime there's any discussion about helping people that are in the lower income portion of our country, that we want to help them and maybe help them do better, maybe help them get jobs that they normally wouldn't be considered for. Anytime that discussion is had, the people who are prosperous will say, you got to pull yourselves up by the bootstrap. That's what I did. I pulled myself up by the bootstrap. Well, you went to private school, dude. You had a family that was there to take care of you. You were not growing up around gangs. You weren't growing up with a single mom. And maybe you did. Maybe you had all those things happen and you prospered. Good for you. But as a system, we need to help those who need help and are willing to actually do something. It's not like you're giving a job in the federal government to someone who's like, yeah, I'm just going to go sit in my office at the Department of Defense and just, play video games all day. I'm sure they do play video games all day. But my point is that that's not what's happening based on this DEI thing. It's this boogeyman that they've created yet once again, all right? It was immigrants are taking your job. Now black people and LGBTQ people are taking your jobs. And who knows who's taking your jobs next. And it's all so that you can have this big fraternity of brotherhood of these white guys from fraternities shaking hands and just giving each other jobs. We need diversity. It brings different points of view into these workspaces. I'm an actor, and I've noticed the move in Hollywood to have diversity in film and television, and it's more representative of the country that we are. And there's points of views that need to be heard. And by having those points of views heard in what's a melting pot in America, we do better as a country. Rather than keeping people of color and LGBTQ and other people that are marginalized, keeping them down and not giving them a shot, not letting them come into a situation where they can prosper, then you end up with just your same homogenous group of people running the country, moving ahead, and you're not helping out at all. I remember watching one time Joy Reid, who's the commentator there on she's on MSNBC, and she said that going to Harvard, she didn't even know that Harvard was a choice, but she had done very well as a student. But because of the community that she'd grown up in, she didn't even think of Harvard as a choice until a recruiter came to their school and looked around and saw this young African-American woman who was a smart person and said, hey, have you thought about applying to Harvard? And then she ended up going to Harvard. And so what I'm trying to say is they're not just giving jobs away to people who are not qualified, all right? But the right would have you believe that they are. I'm not saying that there might not be some redundancy in federal government. I'm not saying the federal government is the most efficient thing in the world. Yes, you can probably fix certain things along the way, but to get rid of DEI is not the solution, right? And again, once again, just to remind everybody, they're not only hiring people based on DEI. I bet you if you go to many of these offices, you would still see a majority of white people, probably white males working in federal government. I'm guessing. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing that that's probably a thing. And therefore, it's good to have diversity. We're a diverse country, all right? Let's not ignore the past. Let's not ignore what we did to marginalize people. This whole idea that they don't want to teach about slavery in Florida because they say white kids are going to feel guilty. White kids won't feel guilty. White kids will be like, wow, my great-grandfather was a real a-hole. And we should give some great-grandchild of a slave a chance to prosper in this school. So DEI is not bad. Get it out of your head. It's not bad. It's a good thing. Duh! Oh, gosh. Guys, I'm comedian Maz Jobrani. I've got a special on YouTube. It's called The Birds and the Bees. Check it out. It's free. If you like it, tell your friends. If you don't like it, keep it to yourselves. I'm on tour too. Come see me live. Bye.